In today's video, I'm going to revisit the Bologna TT course. It was introduced in May the 11th, 2019, so it's been a long time. And it has been pretty well covered about what the most effective pacing is and what the best bike setup is with the TT course. But that was before Zwift decided to shake things up with the bike upgrade. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because of a recent discussion in the Kaboom Discord about what the best bike setup is. Zwifter Bikes is a pretty handy app. It displays the times expected, but it wasn't lining up with my test times previously, but that was before the bike upgrades and the changes. So here we've got Eric E.M. Brown asking about the best bike for his weight. So a 75 kilogram rider at 173 centimeters height. I'm not quite sure if there was an error when he did it, because when he did it, the road bikes were 40 seconds faster than the TT bikes, which I thought was pretty unrealistic from my testing. Diving into it deeper, I'm not sure if there was just an error on the website, because if I go to the website and I look at it myself, I still get 16 minutes and 49 seconds for the Athos, and the SL8's only 0.13 of a second off using the 7.8s. And the TT bikes are slightly faster, 1649 versus 1640. That sort of lines up with what my previous testing was before the bike upgrades. And so first of all, what I'll do is I'll test Eric Brown's weight and height, and then we'll go to a 50 kilogram rider at 165 centimeters, do the same test at 5 watts per kilo, and then we'll drop the power right down to 150 watts to see what the difference is. Because what I suspect is the slower riders, the ones with less power, are actually going to benefit more from a road bike versus a TT bike, because the climb becomes a lot longer. You spend a lot more time on the climb, means that you're spending a lot more time on a lighter bike, if that makes sense. All right, so for this first run, the great thing about having the Ghost is I can set up a Ghost baseline. So what I'll do is I'll use the level 5 Cadex with the the SES 7.8s, and then we'll compare the Cadex with the Zip wheels, the Zip discs. I think it's the, you'll see anyway, I'll show you in a moment. So let's just set up the Ghost. I won't show you the full run, just show you the fact that I've entered with speed, so there is no difference. And now we'll go to the second run. So every single run, I went to the end of the turnaround, and you can see this is the Zip disc with the I call them the rainbows because I always forget what they are. They're the 4, 5, I don't know. Anyway, so now you can see the Ghost, and you'd expect the disc wheels to be faster on the flat, especially down the hill, which pretty much is going to happen. But how much difference is it going to make on the climb? So what we'll do is we'll fast forward to that. It is worthwhile considering the fact that there is that steady incline into the climb. So in terms of pacing, if you were to do this organically, this is where I'd probably start to build into FTP, because there is gains to be made here. Obviously, you don't want to be going above FTP yet. You just want to be sitting, so it's 5%. So this is worthwhile just putting a little bit more pressure on the pedals than you were on the downhill. And of course, on the downhill, you don't want to be going too slowly because you're still fresh. There's no point trying to recover from an effort that you haven't done. So you still got to push close to your threshold. Just keep in mind that you will get a lot more gains on the climb. So here we go, entering the climb, and it says 30 meters. It's never quite accurate, but there is that about 2 seconds it shows difference compared to the 7.8s. So let's fast forward up the climb. All right, so going under the bridge, and still not on parity yet, but is gaining. At the moment, I wouldn't say there's definitely a win to the disc, and definitely not a win towards the 7.8s. It's pretty even so far with halfway up the climb. And so fast forward now, about to finish off the last segment. As you can see, the crown is getting closer and closer. So that's the last pitch. Hit the slightly easier section. By now, you're definitely suffering when you get to this point, but it's well worthwhile just putting that last effort in. Now, there's only 1 meter, 500 meters to go. We'll fast forward to the finish. Okay, so 250 meters to go. Pretty much on parity. Now, I expect the 7.8s to slightly pull ahead, even on this slightly flatter section, because it is still a hill. Still 5%. Here we go, coming into the finish. And the 7.8s have pulled ahead. Not much difference though. The reality is you could use either wheel set. It's going to be much of a muchness. So I was 0.1 of a second slower realistically. All right. So now on to the third run, which is the SL8. I'm only at level 4 upgrade. The 5 upgrade is a slightly lighter bike, but we'll see if that's going to make a big difference or not. Because it's not going to make tens of seconds difference. It's going to make maybe 1 or 2 seconds on this shorter climb. But this is also with the 7.8s, not the disc. And the Ghost is still the Ghost of the 7.8s. So the same wheel set, just a TT bike versus a road bike. Both the road bike is a level 4. So on this downhill, it's probably actually an advantage to be a slightly heavier bike. But you can see how much time the TT bike gains on the road bike through this section, especially down the hill where they're doing 54 kilometers an hour. Well, the TT bike's probably obviously doing more. But can the TT bike gain enough before we hit the climb? We'll fast forward again to the climb. Now it's 4 or 5%. I think what the road bike and the TT bike are fairly similar at this stage in terms of the speed at the time. But you can see the TT bike's already on the climb. So this is a massive deficit that you've got to make up on the road bike. And it seems like a huge amount until you come around this corner and you hit the wall and you see how far the TT bike, how much closer the TT bike is up the road. Actually, we'll go back. So you'll see the TT bike's out of view here, but then you go to the climb, come around this corner, and then it's hit a wall and it's still slightly out of view, but it looks a little bit more tangible, that distance. That gap seems like you can close it a little bit easier, but it's still a long way up the road. So let's just get to under the bridge. Anyway, around the corner, TT bike's still got a big lead. You can see the gap's much bigger than the difference between the wheels, the disc wheels versus the 7.8s. And it's still quite a long way though, so I've lost my jersey. I've been taking so long I've lost the jersey. It's still the same recording. I haven't changed the recording. This just lost the jersey. Okay, so now at this point I'm pretty confident there's no way we're catching the TT bike with the road bike here. We're running out of road. Especially this section where it's quite fast still. There's a steep section here, but there's 275 meters to go. The TT bike has won. Let's just see how much it's won by. If I had a level 5 SL8, if I had a level 5 SL8, it wouldn't have made enough difference to catch the bike. will be generous and we'll say it's, say, 2 seconds faster. At the most, it's probably going to be, I don't know, two tenths of a second faster in reality. So the previous one, well, the fastest, well, the TT bike was 16:04, and let's pause that. So 16:04 versus 16:12, slightly less than 8 seconds. What was the prediction on the website? Okay, so 16:40, take away the TT bike. All right, so there was about, it said 9 seconds, whereas what the test was just slightly under 8 seconds. The times were wrong. It were much faster than that. So 16:04 for the TT bike versus, it says 16:40 for this. So the difference in time was pretty accurate, but the time was not accurate. What I'll quickly do is then show the difference if you actually split your power, 330 versus 370, on a TT bike versus the road bike, just because potentially, as Eric mentioned in the chat, he thinks that it's actually an advantage to the road bike if you're putting out more power on the climb. So let's go on, let's have a look at that. So run 4. Whoops. So this is split power. I'll start with the Cadex again with the 7.8s. What I'll do is I'll do 330 watts until the base of the climb. And then as soon as I come around that corner, I'll up the power to 370. Now, it's not a like for like. It's not going to be 350 watts average. I didn't bother calculating that all out because this isn't a test to see whether splitting your power versus doing a constant power is faster. Of course, splitting your power is always going to be faster, as long as you have a reasonable split. Now, the interesting thing here is the Ghost that I'm going past now is doing 350 watts, but they're on the road bike. So riding the TT bike at 330 watts, I'm pulling away from the road bike. I'm going downhill, which is a huge advantage, but half of the flat here is a downhill. Okay, so we're coming around the corner, and there's pretty much that corner is where it starts sort of heading uphill again. So it says 13 seconds on the clock that the road bike has lost, and you're doing more power. So let's head to the climb. Okay, so doing 330 watts versus 350 watts. The road bike slightly catching back up again on the climb. Obviously doing more power is going to be an advantage. But it's about 9.5 seconds because, 10 seconds here. So around the corner, 11 seconds. So Zwift's a bit weird with the timing. So we'll say 10 seconds. So the thing about using the TT bike is actually go softer into the climb versus the road bike. So we'll just cut to the top just to see what time we get. Kind of a bit of an interest compared to the other one. So 16:04 when we just flatline 350 watts. We're going to do a faster time, obviously. So technically you could probably do more power or you could average higher power, probably only about 2 or 3 watts. But for that extra, 10 seconds? 16:04 versus 15, that's, 13 seconds. Okay, so obviously it was faster. Now let's go to run 5. Run 5 is with the SL8 7.8s. Still, it's a level 4 upgrade bike. 330 watts until the climb. And of course, the TT bike's actually going to wallop it down this hill. The Ghost is the previous, so run 4, which was the 330 watts TT bike with the same wheels. Level 5 upgrade as well. And then it'll then transition to 370 watts on the climb as well. So let's fast forward to the climb. Absolutely decimated again on the flat. Got a lot of making up to do. And you can see my power will go up to 370. So does doing more power on the climb with the TT bike or the road bike make a difference? Or which one does it advantage, the road bike or the TT bike? The last time it was just under 8 seconds, I think, between. I could go back and check. It was just around 8 seconds difference. But what will the difference be on this climb? I don't expect the TT bike to lose. All right, so coming into, I got the level 100. People would have noticed that I have the thing at the top saying that this doesn't count. So my level 100 doesn't count. So anyone who wants to get cranky at me for getting cheating, this doesn't count. I had to go back and do the level 100. You can actually check my Strava if you want. Okay, so there we go, 16 minutes. So what was the previous time? 15. So 16 minutes flat versus, we'll say 51 seconds. So 15:51. So 9 seconds difference. Before it was 8 seconds, now it's 9 seconds. So it actually shows that if you negatively split this course, you go harder up the climb. It's actually more an advantage for using the TT bike. But what about if we do a bike swap? Run 6, so the TT bike with the 7.8 wheels. We'll do the same 330 watts until we get to the base of the climb. Then we'll swap to the road bike, 370 watts. All right, so now with this bike change, I decided to try and do the fastest bike change because obviously my heart rate isn't high. I'm sitting at a desk. I'm not having to be riding the bike. I just took it nice and slow and tried to get a bike swap that most people can do. Obviously on Apple TV, it's a little bit longer, a little bit more strenuous. And also, a lot of events have braking disabled, so you can't just press the A button and slow down. So what I did is I decided to let the speed come off naturally on the climb. And you would have noticed I didn't put 370 watts straight away because I wanted the speed to come down quickly before I change, because that's what you'll be doing. You'll be soft pedaling, let the speed come down. This way you can get to the bike menu quickly. Now, it takes me a good 2 seconds longer there to apply the power, just because I didn't want to rush. Now we're back up, 370 watts on the level 4 SL8. And the ghost ahead of me is the TT bike that was doing 330 watts and then 370 watts. Which you would have seen zoom away from me as we were slowing down for the bike swap. Now it's only showing 4 seconds gap. Zwift time gaps aren't always accurate. They're quite good on the flat, but on climbs they're definitely not accurate. There's way more than 4 seconds gap here, as you can see. But it is pretty close. If you could do a swap in half the time that I did, I'm thinking that you'd be half the distance up the road. But let's head towards the top. Now here we are near the end of the steepest section. It's still pretty close, but not close enough. The TT bike is still winning at this point. I can't see the road bike making up that time. It's made up probably maybe 2/3 of the distance. It's showing 2 seconds, but before it was showing 4 seconds on the climb. So I will say half the distance. There's still a little bit to go, but it's getting close. But then as the road flattens out, the TT bike can do its thing. And whilst it might not necessarily be faster, it won't have the deficit to the road bike as much. Now, at this point, what I'd say is don't bother doing a bike swap because you introduce all sorts of different issues. Famously, you could do a Peter McMullen if you're trying to use a Bluetooth device to help you with this. But the reality is you might be able to save yourself a second, but more likely than not it's going to end up possibly losing you far more time. So in terms of stress, maybe if you want to make it interesting, one of the things I'd like doing with a bike swap is just so that there's a little bit of excitement and a little bit of rest on a TT. Those couple of seconds where you're not pedaling feels great when you've been riding to the bottom. Mind you, you should be feeling pretty fresh if you're pacing this correctly. If you're dead set confident on being able to do a faster bike swap consistently, then you can see that the fastest way is to do a bike swap. It's only, what's the difference? 15:52 versus, it's only it's not even 1.2 seconds, it's 1.13 seconds difference. So with a faster bike change, you can be better. If 2 or 3 seconds is going to make a difference in your race or your series, then consider doing a bike swap. Otherwise, for the safe play, is just concentrate on riding smoothly, riding to the power, and then just giving it absolutely everything you've got on the climb. Just pacing's always going to make the biggest difference. So that's all good and fine if you're Eric Brown, who's that weight and that height. But what about if you're a really light rider? Okay, so here we go. A 50 kilogram rider, 165 centimeters, and we're using the Cadex with 7.8 wheels at 250 watts, so 5 watts per kilo. Now, the ghost that you can see here is actually the heavier rider doing, so the previous rider that was doing 330 watts. You can see on the screen too that when you change your weight, what it does is actually shows your ghost relative to that weight. So I wasn't doing 6.6 watts per kilo before. I was just doing that 330 watts with the 75 kilogram rider. And what's interesting is watts matter. So when we're going down a hill, even though the watts per kilo is higher for this rider, a heavier rider or a rider doing more watts is going to go faster down a hill, which is why I love running down hills and TTs. I can do far less watts per kilo for my FTP, and I can still go faster than someone who's riding at their FTP. So this rider's doing 5 watts per kilo. I think it was 4.3 watts per kilo before. But you'll see a big difference. I'll switch around again once we get to the climb. So just to demonstrate, now that we've been going up a little incline for a while at 2 or 3%, the watts per kilo is making a bigger difference. And we're really in that rider who's doing less watts per kilo and less power. But it does demonstrate that on the downhills, a light rider does need to work. We'll need to work harder. So if you're finishing a downhill event as a light rider, be prepared to suffer. All right, so I'm not going to show the whole climb. Run 8. Again, doing the usual turn. This is the SL8, still level 4 upgrade with the 7.8s. And we're still doing 5 watts per kilo. And again, physics doesn't change. Even with a light rider, the TT bike's still much faster. So we'll go to get to the bottom of the climb. pretty much the same as with the heavier rider. The advantage to the TT bike is quite significant, 21, 22 seconds. But let's head to the top of the climb. So this last section, the TT bike still got the advantage, exactly the same as the heavier rider. Fast forward last 150 meters, 130 meters. Now, what was it, 8 seconds difference before when we did the steady speed? Will it be 8 seconds again? Slightly more than 8 seconds. So it does show that even with a light rider, the TT bike still is, it's still the fastest way. It doesn't, at this speed, at 5 watts per kilo, I suspect because we're doing 5 watts per kilo, that's why it's slightly more to the advantage of the TT bike, because the faster you go up the hill, obviously the more aerodynamics matter. And also the climb is shorter, doing it at 5 watts per kilo. The longer the duration of the climb is going to give the advantage to the lighter bike. So if you shorten the duration of the climb, you haven't got time to catch up that you lost on the flat. Now, what I'll do is I have a quick check to see, what was it? It was what time that relates to on Zwifter bikes. Well, it's showing that Athos is the fastest. And then the SL8 is 1.28 seconds slower. The difference between the Athos and the SL8 is actually grown since I have a lighter rider, because I suspect in relation to the rider's weight, the Athos is, well, that's because of the ratio of the rider's weight compared to the bike. So that's something to consider if you're a much lighter rider, especially as you're probably, as a light rider, you're probably enjoying climbs a lot more than you are flats. So you're probably looking at those climbing races far more. So it's the same rider, 50 kilograms, 165 centimeters, but we're doing 150 watts this time. And we'll use the Cadex level 5 with the 7.8s, I think. I'll just check. Yep, so and we're using the 7.8s. Now this Ghost is going to absolutely rocket off this line, because this is the previous run that I just did on the road bike. So even though we're using a TT bike, you can't, 5 watts per kilo versus 3 watts per kilo, a TT bike's not going to make the difference. There's not really much point in showing the TT bike's run. So what we'll do now is we'll go to the 10th run, which is the SL8 with the 7.8s. And again, 150 watts flat. Now, keep in mind that the Athos will be probably significantly faster for such a light rider at such a low power. Now, of course, weight doesn't matter on the flat as much. So the TT bike, especially going down a hill, the weight is actually an advantage. The TT bike's romping away here. So we'll head towards the climb. The TT bike looks closer because we've gone up this drag already, which is with a 5% climb. We're doing less than 25 k's an hour for a bit. So aerodynamics wasn't as important. And then as we come around this corner, yeah, so you see the TT bike is much, much closer than the other runs. And we're dropping our speed so much slower. Let's see what it does come down to. We're not even to the steepest part of the climb yet. In fact, I'll just fast forward to that because it will take forever. So at 13%, which is, there's still 15% to come. We're doing 7 kilometers an hour. I wouldn't even trust that. We might be doing 6.8 kilometers an hour. And the TT bike is much, much closer. So I'm rounding the corner under the bridge, and the TT bike's in sight now. It's just going around that corner. And we're definitely catching that TT bike before the finish. So this is what I was talking about, the time on the climb. The other tests they finished long ago were well past that. And the distance to the TT bike is roughly to what it was when they finished the climb. But we're extending the climb out by taking longer time. If those other tests were done on a climb twice as long, the road bike would probably beat the TT bike. This is essentially what we're doing here, is we're not taking twice as long, but at 3 watts per kilo versus 5 watts per kilo, the climb is 60% longer. Is that how it works? I don't want to do the math. I should use my phone. Yeah, the climb's 66% longer, assuming I could use a calculator properly. And you can see we're definitely catching. I'll just fast forward, obviously, because this is pretty boring. There we go. We're going to catch at 400 meters. You can see with Zwift, with the Ghost, it always annoys me because the Ghost is never perfectly smooth. I'm not sure if it's the fidelity of the recording or not, because it's not coming from the internet, but maybe it's the recording from the internet back to us, perhaps. But you don't need internet to see ghosts.
I see dead people.
I think when I've tested without internet, I think you get the ghost still. I'm not sure. Ignore that. But the fidelity of the recording seems to be pretty low because the ghosts sometimes bounce back and forth. But you can see here, with 280 meters to go, we're definitely going to be faster. Fast forwarding because it's taking a long time. So, yeah, I'm not quite sure what the tipping point would be, but it wouldn't be far off 3 watts per kilo. I'd say probably 3.2 watts per kilo is the tipping point. So if you are a rider who is building up their power, who just doesn't have the time to train, coming back for injury or something, if very light riders, if you're around 3.2 or below watts per kilo, it might be worthwhile just using the road bike. Definitely at 3 watts per kilo, use the road bike. I suspect if you then negatively split your climb, you'd probably be pretty close to being the same time on the TT bike because it'd be going faster on the TT bike. But it's not, there is a balancing act. This just shows that the slower you go, the more it matters that you have a light bike. And the lighter you are, the more it matters. So, yeah, I think that pretty much I covered everything, really. There might have been a few things that people might want me to test. If you want me to, chuck it in the comments below, and if I get time, I'll see if I can do something with it, or I might have tested it already. I've done a lot of testing. I haven't done it on YouTube because a lot of it was when I was actually riding at the A grade level. I didn't want to give any secrets away. I'd let my teammates know, but I didn't want to be telling the world the best bike setups or the best things to do on courses with these tests. I wanted to keep it to myself. But now that I'm well below A grade, I'm quite happy to do some more testing. And the reality is, only the hardcore of you watch these videos. There's still many who don't see these videos and don't know anything about the advantages. And they'll probably still ride a road bike at 4 or 5 watts per kilo on this course. I think that's everything. I've got to stop recording so that I can edit this video and put it out at some stage. Now, one of the things that you eagle-eyed viewers would have noticed is that I'm using my own account, but I'm offline. It shows that those metrics weren't counting. So when did I record this? Let me see So I recorded those on the 15th of May. It's actually now the 27th of May. I just haven't had a chance to get this video. So for those who are thinking that maybe I'm using the bot to cheat to get to level 100 and all this other stuff, you can go back and check my Strava. I got to level 100 a few days after these tests in the Chasing Pink series. So for you weirdos who want to go diving into my stats, you can go at it and double check to make sure. I'm not going to use my free account to just run a bot 24/7 to try and get these level 5 upgrades. It's a massive waste of money to be running Even on a phone or something, it's just a waste of effort. So that's why I've used my account. One of the things I noticed, that the metrics, it says it doesn't keep it. So you don't get drops, you don't get XP, you don't get distance on your stats. But if I go to the Zwift website, look at my profile, it shows that my ZFTP is now 350 watts or something like that. So that does get affected. I don't give a crap because I don't use that as a metric. I use Exert, and also just I've ridden enough to know what my threshold feels like when I'm riding. But for those who are thinking about doing these tests themselves, just be aware of that even though Zwift says that it's not taking into account metrics, it will be used as your ZFTP. It hasn't affected my category rating. I'm still a level B. So just as well as that, because I was a little bit miffed because I didn't realize that was going to happen. So just keep that in mind. Even though Zwift says it's on that top, that it's not keeping your stats, it's still keeping stats. So be aware of that. Especially if you're like a C or a D cat rider and you want to put in a thing, you're going to ruin your stats for a while. All right, I better go on that note because I need to edit this video. It is now the 27th of May. Let's see if I can get this out in a couple of days, or within a couple of days. I don't bet on it. All right. Peace out.